Hey, real quick question. When did you last think about the road beneath your tires? Probably never, right? You just drive. The road's there. It's always been there. Smooth, solid, reliable. But here's something that'll mess with your head a little. The country that invented car culture, that gave the world the Ford Model T, that built tens of thousands of miles of highway, didn't have a federal gas tax until 1932. Not a penny, not a cent, zero. So if there was no gas tax, no highway fund, no dedicated road money at all, how on earth were America's roads built? Because the answer, it's not what you think, and honestly, it's pretty disturbing. We're talking forced labor, broken men, chains. We're talking wealthy businessmen who used bicycles, bicycles, to reshape an entire country's infrastructure. We're talking a government that refused to spend a single dollar on roads for over a century because powerful men said the Constitution wouldn't allow it. And we're talking about black men in chains building the very roads that white Americans would later drive their brand new Model Ts on. This is the real story, the one nobody puts in the history books, and it starts way before the asphalt. It starts with dirt. Let's go back. Colonial America. You wake up one morning, you're a free man, you've got a small farm, a family, life is hard but you're managing. Then a notice shows up. You owe days of unpaid labor, on the road, no choice, no pay, just show up with your own tools, your own food, and start digging. This was called statute labor, but let's be real, it was just forced work. Every able-bodied man in the county owed road work each year, dig ditches, haul stone, pack dirt, and if you refused, you got fined. Now here's the part that tells you everything about how early America actually worked. If you were wealthy, you could send substitutes, specifically, written right into the law, 3 enslaved people in your place. So the rich guy stayed home, the poor man broke his back, and enslaved people, who had nothing to gain, built roads they'd never freely travel. And the roads? Still terrible. Absolute disaster. Dust in summer, rivers of mud in spring. A 50-mile trip could take days. The federal government watched all of this and did nothing. Why? Because powerful politicians argued roads were unconstitutional, that the federal government had no right to spend money on them. The one time they tried, the National Road, started in 1811, it caused such a political storm that Congress basically shut the whole thing down. No more federal roads, no more federal money, for nearly 100 years. Okay, here's where it gets wild. The thing that finally forced America to care about its roads wasn't a war, wasn't a president, wasn't even a car. It was a bicycle. In the 1880s, cycling was everywhere, millions of Americans riding bikes, and the second they left the city limits, they hit the same nightmare roads that had existed since colonial times. So they got organized. Cycling clubs across the country formed the League of American Wheelmen in 1880, and these weren't just weekend hobbyists. Some of the wealthiest families in America were members. They wanted smooth roads, and they had the power to demand them. But one guy took it further than anyone else. Albert Pope, Boston businessman, Civil War veteran, America's biggest bicycle manufacturer. Pope didn't just complain, he built a movement. He funded a magazine called Good Roads, but here's the genius move. He didn't send it to cyclists. He sent it directly to politicians, farmers, and engineers. He literally created the field of highway engineering by funding courses at MIT. And by 1893, it worked. The federal government, for the first time in decades, officially acknowledged roads again. Tiny budget, tiny office, but the door was open. Now I need you to stay with me here, because this next part, this is the part that should genuinely stop you cold. While cycling clubs in the North were lobbying for better roads, the South had found its own solution. After the Civil War, Southern states built something called convict leasing, basically renting prisoners to private companies, mines, lumber camps, railroads. The mortality rates were horrific, and the racial targeting, completely intentional. Black men were arrested under laws specifically designed to criminalize black life. Vagrancy, loitering, disorderly conduct, funneled straight into forced labor. Then, around 1908, public outrage forced states to end convict leasing. But those prisoners didn't go free. They were just redirected from private companies to public roads. The chain gang was born. Georgia ended convict leasing in 1908. Nearly 5,000 prisoners, 91% of them black, were transferred directly into road construction. Different chains, same captivity. By 1910, every southern state had authorized it. By 1911, 135 out of Georgia's 146 counties were using chain gangs to build roads. These men lived in iron cages, literally rolling iron wagons, wheeled from worksite to worksite. 20 men per cage. No sanitation. Disease everywhere. Armed guards with bloodhounds watching every move. They cleared forests, graded hillsides, hauled stone in scorching heat. For nothing. And here's the thing that should hit hardest. The first Model Ts rolling off Henry Ford's assembly line in 1908, those cars drove on roads these men built. The American open road, the freedom of the highway, the entire mythology of just getting in your car and going, built on forced black labor, in chains, in the 20th century, while your great-grandparents were alive. Meanwhile, the cars kept coming. 1908, Model T launches. Suddenly, everyone wants one. 1913, 13 cars per 1,000 Americans. 1929, 217 per 1,000. And the phrase traffic jam? That entered the American vocabulary in 1913, 5 years after the car went mainstream, because the roads were that unprepared. The whole country was running 20th century machines on 18th century dirt paths. And who was paying to fix it? Everyone, including farmers who'd never sat behind a steering wheel, paying property taxes so wealthy car owners could have smoother roads. The military finally proved just how broken things were. Summer of 1919, a young Army officer named Dwight Eisenhower joined a convoy of 81 military vehicles trying to cross the country, D.C. to San Francisco. It took 65 days. Bridges collapsed. Soldiers got injured. Trucks didn't survive the trip. Moving an army across America was basically impossible. Eisenhower never forgot it. 35 years later, as president, that memory drove him to build the interstate highway system. But first, someone had to figure out how to pay for roads. Here's what most people assume. They assume the federal government, big, powerful Washington, invented the gas tax, that the solution came from the top down. Nope, it came from Oregon. February 1919, 1 cent per gallon. That was the entire revolution. The logic was so simple it's almost embarrassing. The people who use the roads should pay for the roads. Drive more, burn more fuel, pay more. Fair, clean, scalable. It spread fast. Within 6 years, 35 states had their own gas taxes, pulling in $79 million a year. Within 10 years, every single state. And the federal government? They didn't adopt a gas tax until 1932, 13 years after Oregon. And here's the kicker. The first federal gas tax wasn't even created to build roads. It was emergency revenue for the Great Depression. Roads were basically an afterthought. The system you trust your life to every single day, the highways, the interstates, the on-ramps and overpasses, it was never really planned. It was improvised, accidental, stitched together from state experiments and last-minute budget decisions. So the next time you're on a highway, any highway, think about what's underneath it, not just concrete and rebar. History. Farmers forced to work without pay, enslaved people counted as legal substitutes, black men in chains doing back-breaking labor so that decades later, other people's cars would have smooth roads, a bicycle salesman who accidentally created an entire profession, an army convoy that took 65 days and nearly fell apart, one small state that solved, almost by accident, a problem that had stumped a nation for 150 years. America's roads weren't built by some grand grand democratic vision. They were built by extraction from the people with the least power, funded finally by a tax that arrived a century too late and arrived almost by accident. And now, that gas tax is quietly dying because the cars of tomorrow don't run on gasoline, which means the roads of tomorrow have no funding model. We're about to make the same mistake all over again. The only question is, who pays this time?